That's right, guys and dolls. Welcome back to Z Show. Or maybe it's your first time. And then I'll just say, welcome. Greetings. Climb aboard. You found your way to our little corner of the interwebs. Salute. Yes, all. Today is Moon Day. Monday, basically. And we're here. Where I am in the northeast of these United States, spring is in full effect. It's actually like more than spring right now. Where I live, it was almost 90 degrees today, which is quite warm for April. Probably some kind of record. So that's a little weird. But either way, I hope wherever you are, all around this beautiful world, I hope you are well. Oh, how am I, you ask? Well, thank you. It was very courteous, very kind of you. Thanks for asking. I'm well. As I said, spring is in full swing here, which for me means the dreaded allergy season, which is one of my biggest frustrations with my body. Because every year, right around this time, right around now, my body just decides it's going to misbehave. And I'm not too thrilled with this whole situation. But it happens every year, like clockwork, much like the seasons themselves. Much to my chagrin. And then I start thinking, what is this? Why does this happen? And the pollen starts and all the weird dust comes from the trees and stuff. Why does my body do this? I look at other people, they seem fine. But why am I so affected by this? And then I get frustrated. It's crazy. And then I start thinking should I blame my parents? Is it their fault? I'm going to just blame my parents. I'm going to do that. Because they got me jabbed up like good little rule followers when I was young. God, it's like they couldn't stick enough needles in me. I even recall some of those times going into the pediatrician's office. How many times are you going to stick me? I'm just a kid. And then I look at all these other kids and this new enlightened age of wokeism. And some of these parents, they're not sticking their kids up. They're not jabbing them up. And they seem just fine. Every one of them seems completely fine. Not jabbed. Why do they have to jab the shit out of me? So I'm like, maybe that's it. Maybe my immune system's just out of whack. And who knows what they're feeding me back then, too. Sometimes I romanticize about the good old days, but I'm like, we need to go back further. Because if you don't go back enough, it's even more dystopic, if you could even imagine. It's almost like in the 80s, people prided themselves on just being completely unaware and compliant. That was patriotic. You were uncool if you weren't compliant. Because that's how you got things. That's how you got a career, money, stuff. Is through compliance. So of course, that's how they do it. But did you have to jab me up so much that now I have a fucked up immune system? So a tree blossoms and I can't breathe for a week and I get insane headaches. Give me a break. Heidi says she used to have allergies. How did you get rid of them, Heidi? Did they just go away or something? What's your secret? And she says she doesn't take allergy meds anymore. Yeah, I'm like not inclined to take medication of any kind. I'm trying to move in the opposite direction of medication in my life. So I'm not inclined for it. But each year I usually go out and get like a nasal spray. That's the limit to my medication, just to kind of keep things flowing, because otherwise it's too much. And I try not to let it stop me. Like I'll still do everything, but I can't do like yard work, like landscaping. That's the hard part. Like I do it still, but it's a problem. And then wear masks. I tried to have a landscaping job once where I was like working for some guy doing, mowing lawns and doing everything. And it killed me. After a couple of weeks, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't breathe. Like every day was horrible. And I hate when like dust gets in my eyes. So there's constantly like dirt in my eyes. And I have like a phobia because I'm like, what happens to the dirt that goes into your eyes? This is a legitimate question I still don't have an answer for. Like when the dirt goes in, how does it come out? Does it just stay there forever? Eventually, does it just gum up into some weird eye mucus and then get extruded? Does it come out of your tear ducts? I don't know. So they have like a phobia about getting dust in my eyes. It's too much. So I'm like, okay. So people are saying honey, which is good because I love honey. So I've done that. I get like the local honey and stuff. I should probably do that more. It doesn't seem to help, honestly. I eat a lot of honey, like a lot. Like that's my sugar. Like I was putting it in my coffee for a while. And I've quit coffee. I've quit a lot of things lately. I quit cannabis and coffee together. I don't recommend that. But I decided just to do it all at once. I don't want to be dependent on things. That's where I am with the whole thing. I'm not into the dependence thing. So I'm trying to just get rid of everything in my life that I like have a desire for that's not necessary. Including ladies, including you women. Which I don't know. Now that I'm like getting the cannabis and the coffee out of my life, maybe I can like incorporate more of like the women back into my life. I could make that a priority. I have to make room for things, for vices. And yeah, I consider you ladies a vice, believe it or not. I know you're not going to agree, but women are vices now. Who's with me, guys? Any of my older gentlemen of the Z show? You know what I mean. I have to count women amongst, in a certain category, so to speak. Sarah says that she quit coffee and it was pure hell for a week. Yeah. And that's the thing, Sarah. And I'm so proud of myself when I quit something. And then when I go back to it, then I have to feel like the shame and defeat of like, but I just want to get that stuff out of my life. Because when I wake up the first thing in the morning, I'm like, coffee, I need it. Let's go, coffee. And then I'm like, okay. So now this is the first thing every morning. I'm like a fiend for this coffee now. I'm like, no, it's too much. So let me get rid of that because I'm fine if I can get past, like Sarah said, like that first week, I'm sure I'll be fine. And then the cannabis thing. The coffee's way harder to quit than the cannabis. Way harder. Probably a lot of reasons for that. It's much more accepted. Coffee's everywhere. People just expect that you drink coffee. It's weird if you don't. Like even me, who's like kind of an outsider. I even think it's kind of weird that I'm trying to quit coffee now. And then look, I have Christy Lee dolls just telling me to live my life. Yeah, easy for you to say Christy Lee. And that coffee's a health food. Look, I'm not completely like against coffee, but I'm starting to be like against drugs in general. And it's a stimulant, it's a drug. I don't want the dependency. I'm not a young little chippy like you, Christy. I'm 45. So I'm over it. I don't need all these things in my life that I'm attached to. And again, women are one of them. But again, Christy right on cue says women are essential. Essential to what? To reproducing the human race? Okay, you and I could agree on that. That doesn't make them essential to my life. And my history proves otherwise. They've actually been quite detrimental. If women are essential, I don't really think that that makes life a really great thing. If women are like essential, and I have to accept that as fact, I'm not really willing to do that. I I used to think that, Christy, that it was essential that I have like a lovely lady in my life. And I've had some lovely ladies, like objectively, for a lot of time in my life. Because I used to think, much like your statement, that they were indeed essential to my life. I assure you they're not. And if they are, I'm really in trouble. Put it that way, like really in trouble. Because I can't seem to make that essential thing work. Okay, like I'll put it like this, Christy. There's certain things I agree that are essential, like breathing air is essential. I get that. Like eating food, that's essential. I consider those things essential. If the woman thinks essential, I'm in trouble. I'm just saying. In a big way. Yeah, like Tarek. This is Tarek. That's exactly what I was thinking. He said, Z, I agree. I don't drink coffee anymore. Your brain will actually make you more alert naturally. That's what I was going for, Tarek. Thank you. I need that reinforcement. Because that's the way I feel. Because I would like was fine when I was a kid. Like in high school, I didn't get up and drink coffee. And I was like, okay. I was perfectly awake. By the time I got to school, I was fine. Awake, alert. I didn't need anything then. At some point, this coffee thing came in. So as quick as it came in, it can go out. Just like the lady thing. I was fine in high school without the ladies. And believe me, I didn't have a lot of ladies in high school or college. So I was fine then, probably better. It was only until I introduced these things into my life. There we go. That way it says women are the most essential. And we all come from there. And that he loves all the beautiful ladies. Thank you, that way, for expressing that sentiment to the lovely ladies. The sentiment that I was so obviously opposing. So thank you for that. Yeah, now some people are coming out against coffee and saying it attacks your central nervous system. It's just, I'm just trying to get that stuff out of my life. So who knows? Yeah, some people are saying grounding, saying, "See, have you tried stinging nettles or St. John's wort for allergies?" No, but I will. I'll try that. But anyway, much love, everybody. So I have an announcement for Mr. RT. I don't know if you're still here, RT, but you interestingly, for whatever reason, referenced the rising Earth topic for all my flat Earth compatriots out there. Well, I am proud to announce that I have been in touch with one Mr. Dell from Beyond the Imaginary Curve, probably the most prominent rising Earther that there is. And we're lining up a conversation that will hopefully happen right here on Z Show. We have to work out the logistics because he's in the lovely land of the UK people, and we know there's a time difference, so it's not always easy for the UK people. Yeah, Solver missed. Funny how things happen. It's another instance in the Z Show let's say, mythology where I just kind of start talking about something and then the people appear. They appear, like materialize. So hopefully that conversation will happen soon. And I'm sure, Sovereign Mist, I'll alienate another 10% of my audience who thinks that even entertaining the conversation makes me some kind of like nobody shill clown, which I've heard plenty of times. Again, for all the flat earth people out there. For the non-flat earth people, you have no clue what I'm talking about, which is fine. You could still enjoy the show anyway. Dr. Eval says Dell is hard to understand. So is it his like philosophy, his mindset, like the topics he covers, or do you mean like literally his Scottish accent? Because he does have a hardcore Scottish accent. And he doesn't, for some reason, have the best microphone set. Dell, if you're listening, you need to upgrade your microphone. I'm probably not the first person to tell you. Don't get mad at me, Dell. Like I'm not I'm not challenging. I'm just saying you need to upgrade your audio. It's time. It definitely is. Moonlight says Dell is fun times. Okay, there we go. Some and then says when he gets mad, it gets harder. So I'm looking forward to that Dell conversation. I'm looking forward to it. I posted something about Rise and Earth. It was a segment that he had done. And he just responded back. And he said, you know, if you want to have the convo, let's have it. So I'm looking forward to it. But again, I'm just waiting for everybody to call me like an idiot moron grifter shill because I'm having a conversation with Dell. There's a lot of division amongst the flat earthers. I'm seeing it more and more. I thought it would get better. It's getting worse. And particularly highlighted by the recent Austin Whitsitt interview that took place on the InfoWars network with one Mr. Harrison Smith, which I've basically dissected more than is like appropriate at this point because so many people have talked about it. And then I watched Whitsitt do his review on his performance. For some reason, I keep wanting to listen to that topic. Probably because it's one of the larger platforms that the FE topic has been featured. I think like CNN has brought it up one or two times and other mainstream news media sources, but to see it prominently displayed on InfoWars was kind of cool. And to see Whitsitt, because I saw Whitsitt's come up. But again, the division is quite evident in the FE community. A lot of it's unsightly, unseemly, so to speak. I think a lot of it comes from jealousy, if you want to know the truth, amongst the flat earthers. Because everybody wants to be the special boy, the secret prince, so to speak. Shout out to Mr. Benjamin. But everybody has the secret prince, special boy complex, which is understandable. There's egos involved. Anybody who comes on here and spends significant amount of time trying to present content to people, to entertain, educate, there's going to be ego involved. It's part of it. But the game is with yourself. It's about how to handle that and how to work on yourself and refine oneself in the process. Because some of it's completely blatantly obvious to me. Because the critiques he was getting from much of the community were, I think, beyond the pale, so to speak. And a lot of it reeks of just haterade. A lot of it just is straight up haterade. But let me see what RT said about Dell, because I addressed RT. He said, that would be interesting. I still don't buy the idea for numerous and obvious reasons. Yeah, well, RT, we know most of the FE community is, when I say most, the vast majority of the FE community doesn't, as you said, buy the idea. But what I have issue is that people are just call Dell like a shill at this point. They're basically making positive claims that he's disingenuous and even like a paid agent made to look people bad. And I don't see that in him. I think he has a different understanding that's uh, unique, and I think he boldly expresses it. And he's just become, let's say, the figurehead for that particular understanding of the rising earthers. Look, it all sounds crazy, but even the flat earth thing sounds crazy to people. The flat earth thing by itself is isolating and divisive. That's the tough part about being a flat earther. It's very weird. It's not easy. You could say that about any, let's say, trutheism, but flat earth in particular is a very isolating truth, which is one of the sadnesses I have about the flat earth community, because that should actually have a, let's say, a binding effect amongst the community. There should be a camaraderie, so to speak. And there's only a very loose one. And I have my theories on that, which I won't go into it. Christy Lee says that she doesn't notice the FE fighting. Yeah. Well, it's there. So, but yeah, that'll be interesting. So I look forward to the Dell conversation. And again, this goes to my theory that it will indeed, in some ironical way, be the Z show that creates a bridge in the FE community. Because Z is part of the FE community. Me, myself, I. And again, I didn't want to end up here. It's a weird place to be, but it's something that I firstly don't want to escape from, and really couldn't if I wanted to. Because the whole Z brand here is truthism. I come on here and I speak on things as I see them, regardless of how they're categorized by popular culture, regardless of how it may seem to others. So that's dividing in and of itself. But the flat earth thing's different because it's such a departure from the mainstream mindset. And it seems so incredibly crazy to people. And it would be easier for me cognitively to disregard it and kind of move on. But I could say that about anything that goes against the mainstream narrative. It just, FE is a very extreme example because it is a very relatively small community, and it creates a separation between oneself and their family, their community, more than almost any other truthiness. For some reason, probably because it strikes to the very heart of people's identity, their mindset, their paradigm. And it's very dividing. And I didn't realize that when I first got into this. I thought it was interesting and it made sense to me. And I recognized it as something that was true. I didn't know that it would be such a separator regarding me and the rest of society. But yet it is. Because people can maintain a lot of, let's say, conspiracies, but still be accepted within popular culture. Like, say you believe in, I don't know, like, or just say you're way into like the Masons, secret societies, or go into stuff like ruling elites, high level pedophilia, Rothschild banksters, that type of truthiness. That's not going to get you like kicked out of like Thanksgiving. People could even vibe with that because it's an us against them kind of thing. But when you come out and you say, look, I think indeed space is presented as fake and we're being lied to about the very nature of where we live, for some reason it hits differently with people. And maybe it's us as flat earthers. Maybe it's that we separate ourselves. And I could wear that badge. I could jump into that. I've probably separated myself more than anything else with this understanding. And people say to me, well, then why, Z? Why are you so into it? That's not how logic works. I'm not going to lie to myself because of a consequence. And that's probably why I'm a flat earther. Because I had either it was mental or cognitive ability to look past consensus, look past those type of things, right? Look past people's chastisements to actually evaluate a thing, a true thing versus a false thing. And it brought me here. So it is what it is. What are you saying, Christy Lee? She says, I started dating another Glober, Z. His grandfather was a Freemason. Yeah, we know, Christy Lee dolls. We know your dating schedule. It's a 3 to 4 month rotation. You're like clockwork. You're like the fixed luminaries in the sky. I can set my watch by your your dating cycles, Christy. I should just go back through all my shows and mark all the times that you've made similar comments. So, yeah. You're dating a Glober, probably, Christy Lee dolls, because of necessity. If you don't date a Glober, there's nobody to date. I don't hold it against you, Christy. You're one of the few female flat earthers anyway, which is tough. Which actually makes me think, Christy Lee, if you wanted to date a flat earther, you could. But you and I probably know the real reason you need to date a Glober. It's because flat earthers generally, they're broke. Most flat earthers can't keep a job. They can't hold a job down because they're just too like glitched out on reality. I could be speaking for myself at this point. Flat earthers are like a broke crowd, which is funny when people levy the claim against me that I'm like grifting. I'm doing the flat earth to grift for money. It's the most laughable thing ever. I'd be the worst grifter ever if I tried to grift the flat earth community because there's nothing to grift. They're the biggest bunch of outcasts and misfits you could ever imagine. So we know why you have to date a Glober. There's nobody else. Again, division. Somebody was writing that. Who's this? Lonnie wrote, Z, I think it's all distraction because of what they're currently doing to us. And I'm talking about the being part of us. And then Daniel here says, we are awake, and that scares people. Yeah, it's scary. In some ways, I think we have to tone it down a bit. But it's hard. Because we just want to express ourselves. I want to be there. I want to be at the barbecue. And, you know, when this guy's talking about Trump and how great he is, and somebody else is talking about how awesome it is that we're going back to the moon, and isn't science great? And then the other guy next to him, as we're all sitting there drinking a beer, is like, yeah, Elon Musk is like the richest guy on earth, and he's such a genius. And isn't he great? Like, he's a hero. See, they're all talking about like their thing. They're all expressing themselves. But yet me, the flat earther, I can't talk about my thing because all those, like those 5 other guys in the, you know, the barbecue beer circle that they're all standing around, like ignoring their wives. They're all like able to like do their thing, but like I'm not at the same time because my thing that I say will make all of them look at me like I'm crazy. Like they'll just all uniformly, like the guy who hates, you know, Musk because I don't know, maybe he's like conservative. Because Musk is, so maybe there's a progressive guy who hates Musk because, you know, he supports like Trump or whatever. And then the guy that loves Musk, they'll like unite against me when I say he's just bullshit. Because in reality, I'm just throwing a monkey wrench into their whole paradigm. And that's the part that I think they react poorly to, is because I'm not just taking a side within the created paradigm. I'm actually destroying the paradigm. And in some way, I think that destroys them on like a self-esteem level or like a self-identity level. So it's weird. And I know that now because I've been doing this and I'm old enough to know that. So then the next question is how to break the isolation. And there's probably many of you listening to me right now who could relate to that, because to be isolated and individuated as a human being, it really goes against everything that makes us humans. We're hardwired for connecting with other people, operating in groups, functioning in communities and families. That's something that I don't think can ever be taken out of us. So this is a big issue, which I think is part of the effectiveness of the control paradigm, is they understand this and they realize that people will default to consensus and they'll basically conform to the majority because of that very reason, because of our instinct for connection. This is something that I think needs to be looked at much, much, much more in these communities. Yeah, I would agree, Sarah, that people are getting stranger and stranger by the day because things are getting stranger by the day. The advancement in so many things, not just technology, but society, knowledge, the pace of life is now pretty much exponential. So people are reflecting their environment. And I agree, they're stranger and stranger. I go out and about. Like I don't just sit in a room all day. I do things and I'm out. I'm actively engaging in activities. And I would agree that to me, the people are stranger and stranger by the day. But who knows? They might think that about me. They might think, oh, he's getting stranger and stranger by the day. I used to know that guy. He was like way different. What happened to him? Because I've changed a lot externally to people. I've always been the same and still the same me. I don't feel like I've changed, but I'm sure to the vast majority of people who've known me for a while, they'd probably say I've changed. I don't know. You'd have to ask them. All right, let's get going because I could sit here for hours. Maybe I should just change the whole show to my intro. I could just do this for like 2.5 hours and then end it. The funny part is, this seems to be the part of the show that most people are interested in. If I go by my numbers, this seems to be, besides when I have a good guest on, when I have like a popping guest, I can tell that's the greatest interest in my show. The second greatest is me just riffing off the top of my head. But there could be a lot of factors involved with that. The time period, it's late for some people. So I just do my show. Less and less am I swayed by other people's comments, by what people want me to cover. The more my show's being refined, the more it's just me doing my show and doing what I think is the best show based on my capabilities. So that's where it is. Many people may know I'm not in touch with the quote unquote panelverse at this point. Like I'm sure many people in the chat are. Like I couldn't tell you what certain channels are doing. I like when certain people come over and talk to me within the panelverse, but I'm not up on it. And I'm not going to mention particular names right now. There's no need to do it. But I don't even know if some people even still have channels. I'd imagine they do. I don't see why they wouldn't. But I guess my point is I'm not very in touch with it now because, one, I don't think it's productive for me. And two, there's only so much energy and time to go around. And what I want to avoid is compulsively participating in destructive behaviors or things that I feel are so. So I'm less and less into that. I'm into certain people, and I go through phases where I'll listen to certain people more than others. Like I'll tune into certain people that I like, but I'm not getting caught up with everything. I think it's time to move beyond that. So I think it's only natural to progress beyond that. And if people can hold an audience and if people can hold a channel, they'll do so. But for me, at least, it's time to, I can't loop on the same old jokes, the same old narratives, because I've realized the loop really never ends. So if it's not consciously and with intention avoided, then it just becomes a death spiral. All right. Let's get this thing popping. And like I said, I'm glad my voice is holding up. And thank you, everyone, for your recommendations regarding my allergies. It happens every year. It's not new. Unfortunately, I've tried a bunch of natural stuff, and the only thing that seems to work is the pharmaceutical nasal spray, which is upsetting for me. But again, like I said, I'm not the one that throughout my childhood decided to, give me like a bunch of vaccinations and feed me a bunch of genetically modified food. That wasn't my choice. That was done to me. And from what I can tell about the way our immune system works, is that it develops. It's something that has to build through your childhood. And if I didn't have somebody in my life like actively facilitating that, well, then it's not really my fault. It's kind of the way I look at it. All right, let's get going here. Where's my camera? There it is. Greetings, folks. Official opening right now. Good evening, everybody. Greetings and salutations. You have found your way to Z Show. That's right, everybody. It is the end of the rainbow, the bottom of the rabbit hole. And as always, we are broadcasting live and in living color around, yes, I said around, the level horizontal topographical plane that we all call Earth. All right, folks, thanks for being here. It is guaranteed to be a stupendous occasion here on Z Show. We may meet some people later. We're going to talk about some really great topics. We may learn something. We may even grow from the experience. And isn't that the goal? Growth. If you're not growing, you're dying. There really is no in between here on this world. All right, everybody. Much love, as always. Yeah, coming at ya. Who's here? Who is here? Jay in the house, one letter, much love. Mr. RT coming at you that way. Who likes all the lovely ladies? Emilios, man. Stationary Pizza, a.k.a. Christy Lee Dolls, who's now dating a Globie, whose grandfather was a Mason. Our poll coming at you, much love. Zero, aka the Bex Factor, much love, Bex. Sarah Breslin, did I say hi? If not, much love. Divine Spark 313, Heidi coming at you. Shifty Eyes, Shady, welcome as always. Lonnie in the house, it was good to talk to you last week. Welcome. Three Fingers says, "You're doing fine, Z." Well, thank you, Three Fingers. Did you meet any ladies, Three Fingers, at that Flattober festival you went to? No, what was it? Flatstock. Was there any fine ladies there, Three Fingers? If so, make sure you put a good word in for me. Varu. What does Varu say? Says that Z. That's why truther males like I will pretend to care about sports to fit in with the barbecue beer guy crew. Right, we have to pretend to fit in. Which, how does that elevate the conversation? But I agree. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's probably a necessity at this point. Morgan in the house says, "You're making different choices, Z." That's right. Thank you for recognizing that, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan. Truth in the house, or True Riff. I think talking to Christy Lee Dolls about coaxing her to discuss certain topics with people. Sovereign coming at you as always. Much love, Daniel Triplett, Mr. RT, and so many other lovely people. And again, welcome to Z Show, everybody. If it's your first time here, welcome. It's quite a broad scope show. But yes, indeed, I am one of those pesky flat earthers. And I've been doing the show now for thousands of hours, and it's probably not an exaggeration. If not, I'm close. And one thing that I've proven is I will not stop talking about that damn flat earth subject, which may turn you off. Now, if so, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but really, I talk about the things that I feel are important. Maybe someday I won't talk about that particular topic. But turns out I just keep talking about that topic. Pretty much just makes me a flat earther. And I know it kind of puts me in a weird little corner sometimes. But I'm hoping we could break the boundaries with people. I just want people to think a little bit more. Maybe be not so restrictive in one's mindset. But who knows? I don't want to project on you, because there's certain things I think are absurd and you may think are completely relevant. So I guess a lot of it is subjective. Just the way it is. All right, y'all. Let's take a brief musical interlude, and I'll be back shortly with more Z Show. And I can't resist it. I have to play my new favorite song. All right, folks, don't go anywhere. Much love. Come on, where is it? Nope, that's not the one. This is the one.
As his plan for replacing cash, checks, and credit cards with new personalized 666 barcode system were implemented, peace and order began to be re-established. Now, in tonight's program, our great world leader unveils stage 2 of his plan for the perfect world. The amazing new 666 biochip implant, guaranteeing you physical health and spiritual well-being at the punch of a computer key, plus the guarantee of lifelong security within the new 666 world order.
Watch out for 666. Watch out for 666.
In a vision of the future, I saw in a vivid dream that the hour is soon coming when men will become machines. A new one world order will rise and then demand that all the world's people receive their scientific brand. I saw a tiny pre-programmed computer chip so thin in men's foreheads, underneath their skin, linking all its bearers to the system's central brain. The master computer that over them will reign. Watch out for 666 and their computer chip that is designed to strip you on your self-control. Don't sell your soul. Men's thoughts will be programmed by this new technology. Those who take the number, their slaves will always be. So hearken to this warning, if it's life and love you choose, then you'll follow the truth, and that mark you will refuse. Watch out for 666 and their computer chip that is designed to strip you of your self-control. Watch out for 666 and their computer chip that is designed to strip you of your self-control. Don't sell your soul. Don't sell your soul. Watch out for 666.
That's right, everybody. You better watch out for that 666. Don't sell your soul. God, why do I love that song so much? So, for any newbies here, that song and video and others that we feature here on Z Show come from a Christian religious organization. Some call it a cult. I mean, we don't have to be, untoward here. We don't need to be mean. We'll just call it a religious organization, a church, so to speak, called Family International. I think they're associated with the Children of God. I don't know if they're one and the same, but they had a series of songs just like that, warning future generations about the, let's say, coming New World Order. That just happens to be one of my favorite. Watch out for 666. Another classic is Kathy, Don't Go to the Supermarket. So basically, because the whole premise of the song was they're going to have a digital barcode implanted into your forehead and your hand. And the only way you could basically get your groceries or, buy or sell, as the scripture goes, is with the mark of the beast, which is the mark of a man. I don't know. That's scripture is very confusing to me. I think it's like Revelation 13 something, interestingly enough, 13. But again, is it the number of a beast, the number of a man? I've read it like many times. I still can't understand what it's trying to say. But I get the sentiment. It's basically the Bible, like a long time ago, telling you, hey, at some point, they're going to make you basically adhere to their tyrannical control structure. And if you don't do it, you're not going to be able to buy or sell or participate in the economy. And it's kind of what we're watching happen. In so many ways, we can give examples. I mean, let's look at the pandemic of 2020 and beyond. You couldn't really buy or sell unless you were playing along with their game. In so many ways. I mean, not just like Kathy, don't go to the supermarket type of thing, but as some of the people here know who've been listening to me for a while. I had like a whole career, this profession that I was in that I'm now excluded from because I don't want to play along with their little game. Now people tell me, oh, there's ways to get around it, Z. You can move to another state where there are less X, Y, and Z, or that I could have invoked some type of, let's say, conditional demand or something, or some type of conditional acceptance, and presented my former employer with some type of alternative option. I explored many of those things. Some of those, yes, maybe, but a lot of that is a reach. The reality is, if they want to come down with the jack boot, they're going to come down with the boot. And you have to decide, do you want to negotiate? Do you want to walk the fence? Can you? Do the ends justify the means? There's a lot of things to consider. These things aren't very simple, but in the end, maybe it's just about doing what's right, or at least what you feel is right. And if one does what one feels is right, maybe that's the really only thing you really need to worry about. So, but yeah, I mean, with this technological age becomes, or I should say, comes this centralized form of society, this quote unquote global economy. All these things just seem to be part of the technology. It may be a weird thing that they go hand in hand. Some like to conjecture a future utopia where we have advanced technology, but yet some type of, let's say, freedom, liberties, independence, and even a spirituality. Less and less do I think that's an option. There's a weird situation we seem to be in this material world where the level of our technology seems to coincide with the level of centralization and thus top-down control. So it begs the question, what do we do? Well, maybe one option would be to actively, proactively move in a direction that is more connected to nature. So we have to look at, where is our food sourced from? How do we maintain a livelihood, so to speak? And I think these things need to be conscious. But the wave, the tide, which seems to be overwhelming, of this mainstream culture is bringing us along with it. And we're choosing it in many ways, even if it's subconscious. And we may even be at a point now where we're being compelled towards it, or coerced even. But either way, I don't see an escape from their one world order without a active, overt move back towards nature. And I don't see a utopian dream with advanced technology while retaining our spiritual self, our moral selves. It's a weird thing. It's a strange juxtaposition that we find ourselves in. All right, let's get into some stuff here. See what I have for you guys. I wanted to get into some topics that have been on my mind. And there's a bunch of stuff I can cover. One thing I'm not going to cover is the Alston Whitsitt InfoWars quote-unquote debate. It's been done to death. And I'm actively not doing it here, even though I have a lot to say on it. Like I said, people who weren't here early. Like, I've been involved in the fallout from the Whitsitt thing. I wanted to see how the flat earthers would react to Whitsitt getting such a spotlight. And I sure did. Some of it was positive. A lot of it, I thought, just evidenced a great deal of maybe insecurity on people's parts. But either way, much love. All right, so a lot of you know that one of my greatest pet peeves, I guess it's more than a pet peeve. It has to be more than a pet peeve because it actually elicits a huge degree of emotion in me, mainly anger, frustration, anxiety, things like that. I don't know if they're all emotions, but we'll just go with it. And this thing is chemtrails. Chemtrails are my biggest frustration because they're so obvious. I don't expect the average Joe Schmo walking down the street to entertain a conversation with me about, how all water when at rest lies level and horizontal always. And so then how could we live on a spinning globe? I don't expect the average person to be able to relate with that. But it still confounds me to no end that they can't look up in the sky and see what's going on regarding these chemtrails. And if you try to point it out to people, they'll just do everything they can to justify it. And it blows my mind because it's so obvious. And I'm to the point now where even if it were just contrails, and even if it were a natural byproduct of jet airliner technology, I still think it should be dealt with. Now, I don't think that's what it is. I think they're purposely spraying the skies with some type of agent. I don't think that these trails that we see that linger all day, form grids, and then turn the sky into a milky white, hazy mess. I don't think that's by accident. But even if it were, I think it needs to be addressed. You can't re-engineer the planes, the exhaust. You can't do something with the temperature so it doesn't leave these big, misty, hazy trails. And even if you couldn't do that, then let's question, why are we flying around everywhere? All right, see, this is the way my mind thinks, and I don't know why people can't think like this. If I have to choose between living in a society where I can just jump on an airplane and have a nice trip to the Bahamas, or put it this way, if I have to live in a society that, because I have the availability to take a trip wherever I want on an airplane, that the skies are now ruined for my entire life, I would choose to abandon the technology for the clear skies. I'm not putting this. Let me try to put this in a more succinct way. I would rather have clear skies than the trip to Bahamas. Do you understand? I would rather have the clear skies over being able to get to California in a few hours from where I live. You get it? I would trade in the airplane technology to have the clear skies back. You get what I'm saying? I'm not saying we have to get rid of all airplanes, but why do people have to fly over them? Why do most of the people I know within the last year, why have most of them taken 4 vacations on airplanes? This is just the way I think. So even if the sky painting and the chemtrails are just the natural byproducts of flight, I think people should still question their lifestyles in light of that and make a decision, because the decision's easy for me. I'd rather never get on an airplane again and have beautiful crystal clear skies that are natural where I could see the sun. But that's just me. And that's just me giving them the complete benefit of the doubt, because I don't think it's that bad. I think they can have planes and not have those stupid contrails. But anyway, let's get into, what are these chemtrails? What's the evidence for them other than right in our eyes? And what can history tell us? So let's do it.
A little over a decade later, the U.S. military conducted experiments to bring weather to the battlefield.
So this is entitled Government Use of Chemtrails, Operation Popeye. All right. Governmental use of chemtrails, Operation Popeye. This is all known. This is declassified shit. This is real.
October 1966. The Vietnam War is in full swing. U.S. military scientists are devising a way to slow down enemy forces using the weather.
U.S. had gone from advisor status to in-field combat status, and we're not doing well. As a result of not being able to make progress on the ground, the U.S. went to bringing the battle into the atmosphere above the battlefield.
The Air Force employed a groundbreaking military directive called Project Popeye.
Project Popeye was a weather modification program that involved cloud seeding, and the idea was to produce or exaggerate the monsoon rains that are traditional in that region.
Experiments are carried out beforehand with a military aircraft dropping silver iodide crystals in clouds over a strip of the Laos Panhandle.
Silver iodide crystals. Silver, that's what they were using, silver iodide crystals. That's what they're saying here. I don't know if this is fact or fiction, but this is the claim. Which is similar to the things that we hear claimed now with these so-called chemtrails. With metals. Silver's a metal. Most elements, quote-unquote elements of the periodic table are metals, the majority of them. The non-metals are less. But now they use words like barium, strontium, things like that. But the underlying principle remains. These somewhat ionized metals that they're able to either aerosolize or in some way present mixed in this gaseous form. But a metal is it's a particle. It's a, excuse the redundancy, but it's a metal is a metallic particle. It has certain properties. Certain things make a metal. One, they're conductive. They can conduct electricity. Two, they're shiny. And three, they're malleable. So here we're being presented in 1966 this idea of using these metal particles sprayed into the air for basically cloud seeding. That was the claimed use, was use it over a localized area. And apparently they were able to demonstrate a significant increase in the amount of moisture, clouds, and thus rain that that they could produce.
East of the Belovans Plateau in the Sekong River Valley. 50 cloud seeding runs are conducted. 82% of the clouds seeded produced rain within a brief period.
So Project Popeye then became Operation Popeye. It became a proper military program during the Vietnam War.
The goal of Operation Popeye was to extend the monsoon season and create an inordinate amount of rainfall by seeding clouds over the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail was the primary supply route by which the North Vietnamese Army really supplied its troops that were operating, combat forces operating in South Vietnam, as well as supplying the Viet Cong. So it was the most significant logistical center of gravity to the North Vietnamese, and it was an important strategic objective for the United States and our ally South Vietnam to try to interdict that supply line to cut off those supplies to the enemy.
Operation Popeye's objectives are to soften road surfaces on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, cause landslides along roadways, and wash out river crossings.
The military had their own catchphrase as a result of this program, and it was "Make mud, not war."
They flew over 2,600 missions from a period of 1966 to 1972, and it's believed that it did exacerbate the amount of rainfall and probably extended the monsoon season by 30 to 45 days.
All right, so interesting. Now, the purpose of these chemtrails, I don't know. Cloud seeding, yeah, that seems to be one of their goals. It could be to block out the intensity of the sun's rays. It could be so many things. I don't know. I think it may be a little bit more sinister, but I'm not sure. my understanding is that we have an energetic connection with the sky, with the heavens. The sun being certainly included as primary, possibly, among the luminary bodies. Are they in some way interfering with our energetic connection to the sky? If so, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with that if that's even a possibility. See what I mean? If that's even like a 10% possibility that they're cutting me off from the energy that I get from the sun, I'm not okay with that. It's weird that the chemtrails don't seem to linger like all night long. It's weird how they work. They seem to have a certain like active time period. There's like a window. It's very strange. Now, maybe there's different mixtures they have, different concentrations that have different effects. Some days I go out and there's nothing. Like, I think it was yesterday. I went outside and it was one of those days where it was completely blue sky all day long. And what I notice is that it seems rather arbitrary. So even if a day has, let's say, almost exactly the same variables, same temperature, same, from one day to another, same humidity, but yet completely different in terms of what the planes are doing in the sky, where one day they're just spewing out these trails and another day there's nothing. You can see just a tiny little vapor trail behind it, which dissipates almost instantaneously. So to me, that goes beyond coincidence to say, well, what's the only factor that's different? Well, the only factor is what you're doing with the planes, because the atmosphere seems the same, the temperature seems the same. So what are you doing different with your planes that one day you're obliterating the entire sky and the other day it's crystal clear blue sky? And again, completely fascinating. And the fact that people just let it happen, they're just okay with it, completely boggles my mind. Or what else do I have here? Let me play this one. So a lot of people in these communities talk about the Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show. That's not new to a lot of people. But I thought this video in particular was a really good few-minute summation of the movie and some of the main topics connected to, let's say, some of the occulted, hidden aspects of our reality. Which is so weird how we find that continually they're presenting us these true things in the movies, which makes me wonder, what is this Hollywood? Is it just entertainment or could it be something more? Some people think that the Hollywood, the movie industry, is really a propaganda wing of whatever this one world order is. It may have a lot to do with their mysticism, their magic. But for whatever reason, they seem to encode certain understandings in these movies. And this Truman Show seems to be one of these primary ones. So, although many might not be new to this understanding, I thought this video was particularly good. So let's get into it.
The Truman Show is littered with flat Earth references.
Why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as...
That's the big one. We accept the reality of the world which we are presented. That's a monster right there. So true. Because what in our biology, what in our consciousness would believe otherwise? People seem to be trusting by nature. A lot of people then project that out, and they feel as though that others would be logically the same way they are. They think, well, I wouldn't deceive people like that. That's inhuman. That's ungodly. That's immoral. And because of that, they fail to understand the propensity for others who may be less moral, less godly, less human to do so.
Simple as that. If he was absolutely determined to discover the truth, there's no way we could prevent it. Ultimately, Truman prefers his cell.
Hidden Messages in the Truman Show. It's co-produced by Richard.
All right, so let me, for anybody who hasn't seen this movie, let me just give you a background. So it stars Jim Carrey, and he's living in like a idyllic community, like a small town on the waterfront. And he's been sheltered his whole life. He's never gone anywhere. And he starts to find out that things don't quite add up. He starts to get a little hunch that his reality is kind of weird and things are strange. And then you find out, you know, the plot spoiler is that the whole time he was actually in a gigantic movie studio. And he was actually the unknowing star of a reality show where everybody was in on it, including his wife, his best friend, his parents, except him. It's a weird concept. So it's basically like they took a child, placed him in a show, a reality show, but he thinks it's real. So anyway, that's the movie.
Richard Luke Rothschild. The Truman Show is a movie made by the Rothschilds family. The Truman Show logo shows a picture of Earth, which doesn't make a lot of sense for the Truman Show itself. You would think that it showed a picture of Truman's town.
Right. It shows a globe, which was new to me. I didn't realize that the Truman Show logo is a globe.
But the funny thing is, the dome that Truman lives in over there in Hollywood actually pans out and turns into Earth. Right here, it just changes from Truman's dome into the sphere Earth. So it seems that the Truman Show logo itself.
Wow. Now, some people might say, oh, you guys are reaching, pareidolia. But I don't know. A lot of this to me is beyond coincidence. And again, I don't put it past them to present this to us. There's a weird thing when you study the alchemical properties of their magic, their mysticism that they practice, because there seems to be principles associated with it. One of them has to do with this concept of consent and an idea called the revelation of the method. They appear to be under some energetic cosmic law that in order to perpetrate a spell onto us, they must present the truth. They must present accessible truth to the masses. And by doing so, it somehow absolves them cosmically, karmically, of responsibility for the dastardly actions. This appears to be, in my view, the main reason why they must present this. It has to do with universal law, which appears to govern this entire reality, and the necessity for them to present the deception to us. Because in their rationality, we are then choosing the deception they're not perpetrating it upon us. And again, it comes back to the underlying principle of consent.
Is showing that this is not a story about one town, it's a story about the earth.
Personally, I think the unconquered south face is the only one worth scaling. It's a 20,000-foot sheer wall of ice, but that's never stopped me before.
The south face, wall of ice. Again, some people can claim that's a coincidence, but how many of these so-called coincidences can you have in one, like, 2-hour movie?
The stars are fake or artificial, and there's actually a rip in the dome. Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky. When this star fell in an old trailer,
and the star, which was a light that fell from the dome sky, was named Sirius. Now, for anybody who's been studying these things long enough, you come to understand the importance of the dog star Sirius with these occultists. For whatever reason, certain stars in the heavens are ascribed particular importance. Sirius is certainly one of those. In particular, it's the one that is typically associated with these bloodline elites. Whether they feel as though they came from there energetically or otherwise, the fact that it's Sirius, to me, indicates something.
It showed an actual rip in the dome. However, in the actual movie, that's kind of covered up with the lamppost and the rip is not shown. About halfway through the movie, it shows the dome-style Earth. The guy picks up a pepperoni pizza slice, and the newspaper says classified. Now, typically it would say classifieds. However, in this case, the S is omitted, and that means that it is not a classified section. It means that the information that they're displaying is classified. There's a globe in his garden that he later uses to sneak out when he's escaping from the town. Here his friend has moved that.
So he's sneaking out of the globe or through the globe.
A globe aside, and he says that Truman's gone. Truman's radio is another sphere Earth. He does have vitamin D, which he needs to take because he's not getting any real sunlight. And as we've just seen, Truman's Earth is an actual flat Earth with a dome over it. Truman is leaving in a boat. It's called the Santa Maria. The Santa Maria here is indicative that he's going to a new world. The weather starts out fair, but quickly gets very bad, which is exactly what happens when you sail to Antarctica. They call it the Roaring 40s, the Furious 50s, and the Shrieking or Screaming 60s. And once you get down to 70 degrees south, things start not so windy anymore. But the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s are what's depicted here, and Truman's going through them. There's one more very quick hint that he is heading to Antarctica, where we can see that the compass is spinning. This is something that happens when you go close to the South Pole. Your compass will just spin. So in addition to the bad weather, the compass spinning, once Truman finally escapes the storm, he runs smack into an ice wall. And we can argue that it's not ice here, it's sky, but it would be the firmament then. So he's either hit the firmament or he's hit the ice wall. Now the staircase here may be a reference back to the very beginning of the movie where he was talking about climbing a 20,000-foot unconquered wall of ice. So here he is, come to the ice wall or come to the firmament, and he has to climb up in order to get to the top of it where he finds the exit. He then exits from the realm, leaves the firmament, and goes to a new world. It takes a bow.
Not everybody can be a robot.
I think that was it. There's more in this video, but I'm not sure what it is.
Polish up.
Is this your country?
No, my country lies beyond.
Well, it's Narnia. So yeah, wild there with the Truman Show. Completely strange. I remember when that movie first came out. I liked it, but this was, it was a while ago. So I didn't have these understandings that I have now. But looking back on it, the fact that they even made that movie is crazy to me. And that Jim Carrey was involved in it. He seems involved with these weird things. I've seen some recent interviews with him. First of all, he's looking his age. He's starting to age. That's another thing. I'm watching all these movie stars that like I grew up with that were like my age, maybe a little bit older, but kind of around my age, and they're all looking old now. It's freaking me out in so many ways. A lot of it is a lot of these Hollywood stars don't age well. I don't know if it's the lifestyle that they're into. Some people say that there's a big practice amongst them where they consume certain, let's say, narcotics. One of them is called adrenochrome, and that you become highly dependent on it. And if you stop or you're deprived of it for some reason, you start to age really quickly. And, you know, if anybody doesn't know what adrenochrome is, I mean, you could look it up and you can kind of get an idea of it. All right, so I dropped the link in for anybody who wants to come up. I've somebody back named King Steven. I wonder if it's the King Steven. Bex is here. She'll let me know. She could recognize the voice because I am aware of somebody who goes by King Steven. To my knowledge, he's very into I guess soul recycling, I guess you can say, from what I know about his content. Let me let him up. Steven, welcome to Z Show.
Hey Z, how's it going?
How's it going? It actually sounds like Steven. It sounds like you. Much love.
Thank you. It sounds like me because it is me. We've never met before. I guess my reputation precedes me somehow over here.
Well,
I'm new here.
YouTube's kind of it's a big place in some ways, but it's a small place in other ways, and oftentimes one's reputation does precede them. But I'm fairly familiar with your channel and your work. I know you're into, from my knowledge, like I said, soul recycling. I don't want to limit your content or your knowledge base, but when I see your name, that kind of comes to mind. Am I on there, or?
Yeah, that's a big part of it, that this is a recycling system. Shout out to Beck/0. I see her comment. I'm also into esoterica, truth-seeking. I was looking into flat Earth around 2015 or so, the Mandela effect. Just the nature of reality, the nature of this realm I'm interested in delving into. And I happened to catch part of your live stream. I came on when you were talking about the Truman Show. You were showing a video and you were giving your comments on it. So that was interesting.
So what do you think about that? Well, even in general, the idea that Hollywood in some weird way seems to encode many of the hidden understandings within these movies. So they're presenting us through their entertainment the truth that they seem to be hiding us. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do, actually. That's a way to increase magic. Dark occultists do believe that RT, I'm not just the soul trap dude, but anyway, dark occultists do believe that if you show someone what you're going to do or what you're doing before you cast the spell, that it's like 10 times more powerful when you pull it off. It'd be like somebody like me or someone else. It doesn't have to be me, but if I told you I'm going to nuke your computer or your hard drive, right? And told you, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be on your system. I'm going to take over. I'll get admin root access and all that stuff, and did it right in front of your eyes and froze your keyboard so that you couldn't stop me. And kind of in a panic, you didn't think of powering down your laptop or your desktop, and you just watching the screen going, this guy's going nuts on my system, and I'm trying to backspace, whatever you're trying to do with your keyboard. But if I told you I'm going to do that before I do it, it increases the damage, not just psychologically, but I think spiritually. And it is known as revelation of the method, revealing what you're going to do before you do it, just like they also do predictive programming. They'll show us certain events, like the event in Manhattan in 2001. I won't go into details, but you know which one, the number 9 and double hockey sticks, we'll call it. That event, they showed us in media, they showed us in X-Files and cartoons like The Simpsons and just all over the place. If you go back and look, there's dozens of ways that they showed us. So they don't mind showing us. And I think this is where a lot of young truthers or newbie truthers, baby truthers, whatever, that are kind of new to this get tripped up thinking, well, why would they show us? Why would they show us? Because they kind of assume that, well, if they show us, everybody's going to see. But they know human psychology, knowing most people won't see if they show us. It's a small handful compared to the world population that do see this at all. So they're not worried. They're not under threat from us, from me, or dozen or 1,000 other people or 10,000 people. It's not enough spread out over the realm to really do anything. Even if we discuss it, we're just viewed as crazy people, or people. I was watching a show earlier today with Gen X Jeff. I call him Janice Jeff now, and Chuck and a few other guests were on there, YouTubers, and they were basically showing Plato's cave, the allegory of the cave. The Machine Lies was on there as well, and he was actually right on in terms of what the image was. It was the allegory, Plato's cave. But my point being, they dismissed it all as, oh, truth seekers are they're just QAnon kooks and just idiots, and they're not part of reality. They're out of touch. And this is the standard in this realm. So this is black magic that is going on in terms of these events that they pull off, and they do show us ahead of time because their belief is that it increases the power of their magic, power of their spell, and the power of what they get out of it in terms of pulling it off, even though they've shown us. Plus, it's kind of like a game for them. It's like with Freemasons with the black and white squares, the checkerboard. It's kind of a game between darkness and light, and left and right and wrong. And it's kind of a game of catch us if you can. So it kind of makes it interesting for them, and it's like a thrill to them to pull this off in front of our eyes. Where if they wanted to do it completely in secret without showing us, they could pull that off.
Right. I agree. And I think what most people miss is the underlying, let's say, mysticism that really goes into the belief set of these controlling elites. Now, they seem to have presented us with certain religions, these certain deities, but their practices seem to follow a completely other, let's say, religion and other deities. We're just not aware of it, but they certainly are. And I would agree that a lot of it strengthens their spell because we're consenting to it more, even if it's subconsciously. And I think there's less, let's say, karmic or cosmic debt that they get if we're consenting to it. So like you said, if they can show us 9/11 through Hollywood and through the media before they do it, when they pull it off, it's less impact on them because there seems to always need to be an energetic trade-off that honors natural law. It was the same thing with the 2020 pandemic, and seemingly every major impactful event that we see throughout humanity is this idea that we're choosing it, so to speak. They present it to us, it happens, and then we let them get away with it. And I agree, it like builds their power to some extent. Well, let me ask you this, Stephen. Do you feel as though the astrology of these times is playing into let's say, the current circumstances that we see in culture, do you think that they know the astrology and that they've been building towards this technological age, this potential shift towards the transhumanistic age, the biodigital convergence? Do you think this is all in the astrology and that they use that to manifest some type of world that they're trying to create? Or do you think it's just more haphazard than that?
I think the astrology is well known by them, just like psychology. Human psychology is well known. The astrology of this realm, they plan things out 100, 200, maybe even 500, 1,000 years ahead. So they knew this was coming, this age we're in. They were well aware of it long before now. And they are bloodline families, so they plan lifetimes ahead, generations ahead, whereas a regular person might plan for their kids' college or something, right? They might plan 18, 20 years ahead when they have a baby. But that's pretty much the extent of the average person or even a planning type of human being. These creatures that run this realm have long term plans. They don't just have 20, 30-year plans, 50-year plans. They have centuries plans, planning centuries ahead. They do go by the astrology. So they know when the right time is to pull something off. Like 9/11, for example, was done by the astrology, the world wars, things like that. They know exactly what they're doing. Bex actually made a good point. I don't want to sidetrack things too much, but I'll address it where she said in the chat room about the victors sometimes pretending to be losers. They lie and hide, and behind the nations they conquered. I do believe that that was done even with America. I don't believe that America defeated the British. Actually, in reality, it's still tied in with British rule, just like Canada is and Commonwealth nations. That's why the Queen is still revered and the King now. But Queen Elizabeth was one of the biggest landowners in the realm. And I think these entities that run at the very top of the pyramid, I do not think are just Rothschilds and Rockefellers. I think there's hidden families above them that are not known out in the media. And I also think they're entities because they plan for things, even cathedrals or huge, huge projects that will take, some of them took 300 years, 400 years to build. And these ones in these bloodlines, they know that reincarnation is real. They plan for that. They know they're coming back, and they're not going to be coming back as a peasant like RT or Provo Planet or somebody in the chat room like that. They know they're coming back into the same bloodline family. Like when Queen Elizabeth, whether she's actually dead or not, I don't know for sure. I haven't dug deep into it. And I don't care too much about it at this point. But if she actually did pass on, she would know, just like the rest of her family and the other European royals and the other royals around the realm, that they're coming back, and they're coming back into the same bloodline. They're going to be wealthy again and powerful again. So they're not worried about that. They know that they're going to have a privileged place in this realm. And she knew that she was connected with Prophet Muhammad. And some even claim that they go back to the Jesus bloodline. I don't know if that's been proven or not. I haven't dug deep into that, but she did claim heritage, like ancestry from the Prophet Muhammad of Islam, and they are connected. And these bloodline families go back to the pharaohs, and in those days, like ancient Egypt was
It
not
seems
African. It's related to Northern Europeans, actually.
so interesting. So a lot of things you're saying I've looked into also. Firstly, what you said about the American Revolutionary War and this idea that America gained its independence. But as you said, when they signed the treaty, like the Treaty of 1783 or something like that, you're exactly right. In the treaty, the English monarchy, the royals, maintained their status as royals over the Americas. They were able to still receive financial rewards after the war. Their debts were still paid off, and these things were honored. And what you said about their bloodline, I also agree with, that they seem to be able to trace their bloodline very specifically back to certain accounts in the Bible and others. And there's lots of different stories. They're given the name of the black nobility and other things, but there is a singular bloodline that goes back. And many people may be surprised to hear that all of the American presidents, except one, I believe it was Taft, are related to a single person. And that person was the King of England, who also happened to be the king that signed the Magna Carta. So not only do we have all of the Eurasian bloodline royalty being connected to a single or a few bloodlines, but we even have the American presidents still connected to that very same bloodline. So I want to ask you about the reincarnation of these elite bloodlines. Do you have an understanding that all of mankind, men and women, get reincarnated if they can't escape it? Is it only certain bloodlines? Maybe go into the reincarnation thing, because a lot of that's fascinating.
All right, I'll go into that. I just want to touch upon the American presidents thing. That is true. They are royal bloodline, except for one, including President William McKinley. And there's a guy on YouTube with a long time running channel, YouTube channel, Quantum of Conscience. I call him Quantum of Con Man. Matt McKinley, he's a direct descendant of President William McKinley. So he is bloodline related, and he has almost 100,000 followers, and most on his channel don't have a clue. So that's what goes on. There's also bloodline connected. Most of Hollywood, at least the top tier, like A-list actors and actresses, are bloodline related. That's what the red carpet is. It's a bloodline, a line of blood. That's why they have these red carpet events, because it's a bloodline. They're showing you the red carpet, which looks like a line of blood on the ground, and they walk on it. So they are bloodline, almost all of them. As for reincarnation, I think that the top, let's say the bloodline families, like Prince Philip was quoted as saying that if he can get reincarnated again and come back here, he wants to come back as a virus to wipe out a big percentage of humanity. So I think sometimes they tell you in plain sight, again, revelation of the method, that they know that they're coming back. And then he's kind of putting a spin on it, saying that he hates humanity and he'll come back as a virus to wipe out a lot of humanity. So what else was I going to get? Oh, the reincarnation of people, regular people. I do believe that this is occurring, and I think there's a memory wipe, or memories are kind of kept from us where our brain has a governor on it. So what happens is we don't remember where we were, what we were before we were born. Most people don't. Some people, it's extremely rare, but some people do have in utero, in the womb memories and pre-birth memories. So some have very vivid memories of being somewhere right before they were put here. But this is very rare. But also near-death experience research shows a lot of what's going on with, I call it recycling, but it's reincarnation. It's basically, I wouldn't call it memory wiping. A lot of other channels call it that, but I do think we will have access to our memories once we're out of body as a spirit and get out of this, I'll call it realm, or this level. I call it a hell realm because of all the suffering here, the 10,000 diseases, life eating life every single second of every day. Everything has to eat life here to survive. Just the design of this realm itself is extremely bad, put it that way. I'm summing up thousands of hours of my work, basically trying to sum it up here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when people say, oh, this place was made by a loving God, God the Almighty, the creator of all, you seem to have a different understanding. It seems like that maybe it wasn't such a benevolent place made by such a benevolent God, that maybe this is something else. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, it is something else. And my videos prove this. If people want to check out the Sanity Machine channel and look through my videos, I show in my lives and my videos, recorded videos, what this place is. There's 10,000 documented diseases. We have earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, firestorms, great floods, blizzards, volcanic eruptions, all this stuff is not free will. It's built into the design of the realm. Plus genetic disorders, diseases, deformed children, disabled children. It goes on. The suffering here is immense. If you really look at it, my life is fine. People mistake it thinking, well, he must be miserable to call. No, I have all the
Right.
money I need. I have all the money I need. I don't have to work again or sell anything again. I can live off of what I have for the rest of my life. I'm doing this because I discovered something, or my model for something is different from the other channels, the soul trap channels and reincarnation type channels. I have a different model, a different view, and I've gone in deep on this stuff. So I just looked beyond myself at the suffering. I looked at, when my mother died, I saw how she suffered. And then I just looked deeper and deeper, and I actually had a shared death experience when my mom died. It's known as that. I didn't coin the term, but I found out later, this was over a decade ago, that she passed away. And I found out later that there's a thing called a shared death experience, where you're either there seeing somebody's spirit leave, or they died and you're a distance away, or you're dreaming and they show you in a dream and say goodbye, and that's the moment they died. That's what happened with me. I was in my mom's hospital room, sleeping on one of those little pull-out chair beds at the foot of her bed, and she came through my dream as soon as I fell asleep and said, "Goodbye, Stephen." And I knew it was her. It was telepathic communication. And she didn't look like her body. She looked like an energy being, like a light being, but more energy than just light, like something like what stars look like when you zoom in on them with like a P1000 camera, but vaguely in the shape of a human, but that kind of flickering light that stars look like almost like a mirror ball and a ball of energy. She kind of looked like that. She said very clearly, "Goodbye, Stephen." And then there was just overwhelming peace in the dream. Before I even woke up from the dream, I woke up moments after that, and I didn't open my eyes, but I knew she was gone. I knew she had passed away while I was in the dream. And when I woke up, I just was still like laying down with my eyes shut, feeling the peaceful, and no grief, no sadness, this overwhelming peace that just filled the whole hospital room. If anybody had walked in there, I know they would have felt that peaceful feeling. It was the
Wow.
most peace I ever felt. So that
I have
was
a
a
similar
shared death
experience.
experience. Go ahead.
So you experienced that, and that gives you some insight into the things that you talk about, is because for you it was a real visceral thing, which I find is interesting, because that's kind of the same thing in my life, where I had experiences in my life that I know were real as anything, and it kind of informed my understanding regarding many of these topics. So now I know a little bit more about you and why you're maybe so passionate about uh, these topics, because it's real. And I like what you said about, because people say that to me oftentimes when I discuss certain things. They'll say, "Oh, well, maybe you're just projecting your worldview out on other people." And I actively try not to do that. I purposely endeavor to not project things and try to be objective and present things in a way that's fact-based and substantiated. But people want to default to that. They'll say, well, you think the world's bad and is made by, let's say, more of a nefarious creator because your life must be shit or something like that. And it's like a very dismissive thing that people do. Maybe it's a defense mechanism that they employ to protect their, little belief system. But I do find that as people try to minimize any concept when it comes to, especially the concept of saying, hey, maybe this almighty God, this creator of heaven and earth that's referenced in all these religions, maybe that's not the greatest being. Maybe it doesn't have your best interest in mind. And you might want to think twice about bowing down and consistently praying and worshiping a deity that you probably don't know much about, and you were just conditioned to love and worship. So I kind of get that.
I have a different realization with regard to that whole, what this reality might be. I've studied quite a bit, and I've had my own personal realizations. One similar to the fellow King just described with a loved one. I had something very, very similar with a very close loved one happen to me, where
I didn't get to say goodbye to them the way I wish I could have said goodbye to them in the material fashion, but I had a dream where I was able to say goodbye to them to some effect and be at peace with it and know wholeheartedly that they crossed over, you know. But I feel like this reality altogether is just it's a place where everything, first of all, that comes into this reality has to suffer the fourfold miseries of birth, disease, old age, and death. So yes, it's a suffering realm. That begs the question now, why did the creator create it that way, right? Because we have an original constitutional position, I believe, and that is to be the enjoyed and not the enjoyer. However, I believe the creator is so merciful that he gave us a reality by which we can live that illusion outside of the ultimate reality, which is, you know, outside of the material world, which is we are the enjoyed. We are the servants of the servants of the servants of the Most High. And that's our eternal constitutional position. However, when we step outside of that state, we enter into the material realm and we incarnate in these physical bodies and have this experience that has the built-in mechanism to send you back home to Godhead, because it's not supposed to be comfortable here. You're not supposed to be here forever. And that's just the nature of it. It's supposed to drive you back to your original constitutional position, the eternal position, which is the enjoyed. And if the whole is enjoying, then you are part of that whole, then you must be enjoying as well. And that's the whole summum bonum of it all, in my, you know, experience of it all.
I just want to say a couple things here. What I say, though, doesn't hinge on my experience. I have observable truth that people can look at on my videos on my channel and that matches up with reality and prove this exists. What he's talking about here matches up where it's observably true. But that experience, my mom had cancer for over a decade. The only time I dreamt of her dying was when she actually died. All that time, she had many surgeries, treatments, chemo, the whole 9 yards. For over a decade, well over a decade, I wasn't having dreams of her dying until the moment she actually did die. So it was exactly at the time of her death that I dreamed of her dying, leaving her body, visiting me in the dream. And I woke up and I was in the room with her in the hospital room, and her breathing wasn't breathing, and I knew she was gone before I even opened my eyes. So I don't think it's explainable any other way. I also want to say that I don't think that means that she crossed over. There was tremendous peace in that room. I think she left her body as a spirit, but I don't know whether my own mom or grandparents got recycled, the ones I've lost. I don't know. I think the gate is narrow out of here. And I think there's a lot of tricks and deceptions going on. I also want to say this. I don't believe in an almighty creator, because if you have that, or authority, or a lord, or a ruler, or a master, it makes you a slave. And I'm not a slave. I'm an eternal being. A lot of people believe there's one eternal God and that we all were created by it, which would not make us eternal because we had a starting point. I didn't have a starting point. I don't have an ending point. I'm in this body, but this body's not me any more than getting into a pickup truck and driving it around. I'm not the pickup truck. That's a vehicle. This meat suit is just a vehicle that I'm temporarily in this realm. Do I think that the suffering here is necessary? Not really. No, I don't think that. I think that's kind of Stockholm Syndrome slavery thing, because everything I learned here, I didn't learn through suffering or beatings. I'm a self-taught artist. I'm a published writer, and nobody taught me these things. I didn't go to a school or a class. I didn't go take art classes and learn how to draw in pen and ink or learn how to paint. I learned it on my own without suffering, without somebody beating me over the head. And actually, trauma and suffering in children inhibits learning. And if it's extreme enough, a child won't even know how to read or speak or anything. If you traumatize someone mentally badly enough, they can't learn. Trauma actually inhibits learning.
Like stunts. It's like a stunting effect.
Yeah, it stunts. It retards.
Interesting. It's an interesting perspective, Stephen. I can resonate with very much of what you said. A lot of it doesn't go over well with most people because it's maybe a hard truth, but A truth is a truth nonetheless, regardless of maybe how it makes one feel. But all right, I need to move on to my next segment, the news segment. So I'm gonna start winding the open panel down. Stephen,
All
any
right.
final thoughts for the audience? It was nice to meet you, man. It was good to have a
Oh, it's good to
conversation
meet
with
you
you.
too. You could come on my show sometime. I do interviews once in a while, or I do live streams. So if you wanted to hop on as a guest, Z, you could come on my show and discuss this and other topics. I'm going to give a shout out to my haters in the chat from a whole bunch of them there. Provo, That Way, RT, Jimbo. There's a whole bunch. I don't know if Bex is still a hater or not, but shout out to my haters. I would say the ultimate in willful ignorance is to mock and dismiss something without investigation. And I hate to say this, Z, but a lot of your audience is kind of rude that way, and they're dismissing without investigating. I think that intelligent people investigate first before they attack someone. And I don't think your audience, for the most part, has been on my channel. But Z, again, I offer you, you can come on as a guest on my live show sometime and have a good conversation. And my audience will be asking intelligent questions, and they won't be rude or calling me psycho or all the things that are going on right now in your chat. So
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right,
All
much
right,
love,
well,
dude.
Yep.
Good
Mad
convo.
love to any of my fans that might be here and the ones that might see this. Take care.
That's King Steven, everybody. I thought that was a fairly good convo. I actually highly was agreeing with many of his takes, but I'm kind of extremist compared to some people regarding the nature of this reality. Where you know, the more I go and I kind of see maybe past some of the deceptions of religion and past some of the deceptions given to us by history and academia, I'm starting to see maybe the nature of this reality is not as benevolent as we would like to believe through maybe a strategy of coping. I think it's natural for people to want to use certain defense mechanisms to protect ourselves and things like that. Anyway.
I think in this realm, he who controls the paradigm is God. So, it goes back to the whole Truman Show. What I kind of wanted to say about that was, are they doing predictive programming with us and with all the Hollywood and the cartoons, or is it something more? Is it kind of like we're gonna get a pass on doing this and nobody will believe that we're doing this because Hollywood produced it. Hollywood brought it to your attention first, and because Hollywood brought it to your attention first, it would never leave the realm of fiction, so to speak. So it kind of sets a cognitive precedence that if something to the like happened in the future, it's not a man-made thing, or it's not Hollywood produced, right? Because it has to be fiction, So if someone, it's like if a social pariah comes out and starts spouting really good ideas that would actually fix society, but because he's a social pariah, those ideas are thrown out with the pariah altogether, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get that. It sort of creates this, like almost like a bipolar situation.
Yeah, it's a spell almost. It puts people into a spell where they can't really
people generalize things. People have a tendency to categorize people, ideas, philosophies, events, and they like to place them like on a nice organized shelf. But unfortunately, what people usually fail to understand is the threshold or the criteria that they use for their categorization is often underpinned by some type of engineered or indoctrinated belief set. And so they see the world in a particular way and they hold it as true, but they usually fail to understand their own engineered understanding and the basic foundations that they're using to create their categories. And that's why it's so, to me, so difficult to converse with people, especially in these times when people have such diverse beliefs, because there's so much information, there's so much things that we encounter through this mass media, that there's such a diversity amongst people's understandings of this world. And then everybody has their particular their groupings, and then they group people in it. So they'll say, oh, well, Emmanuel, he's in this group of people, so everything you say will be colored with their particular bias towards you. Or they'll say, oh, Z's one of those type of people, right? And that's why I think there's probably some type of maybe a necessity, and that it's somewhat incumbent upon people of a certain consciousness and a certain understanding to actively try to bridge those gaps amongst people, where we almost have to take the high road in almost all these interactions, and we can't expect them to meet us on our level. And I don't say this in a way that's obnoxious, hopefully, or arrogant, but certain people have higher consciousness than other people. So if you are a person of consciousness, if you are a person who maybe has the courage to delve into some of these more esoteric topics that are a little scary, like thinking maybe this isn't the nicest place to be in, and maybe these deities aren't necessarily the most benevolent, well, maybe then it's incumbent upon you to bridge the gap with people who might be of lesser conscious. Do you have any experience with that, Emmanuel? With, like, because I know the things that you're into and certain understandings that you've expressed. How do you in your everyday life work to bridge the gap between people who may categorize you in a certain way and say, oh, he's crazy, or he lost it? Do you do anything, or do you have an
It's funny
intention towards
it's funny
that?
yeah, it's funny that you ask, because I'm somewhat of a recluse nowadays. I don't really like hang out with a lot of people. I'm kind of a lone ranger, so to speak. But back, a couple years ago, yeah, when I was around a lot of people, I did I I found myself being very frustrated and seeming to come off a certain way around, the other people that I was trying to help enlighten. And you kind of have to find a skillful way to share what you know, because if you share it in a certain way, you just come off as like a kook, or, it's like Brainy Smurf. Nobody liked Brainy Smurf. And if you watch every episode, he was like the first one to have the solution to the problem, but nobody liked the smartass. So they kind of just,
Right.
so that's how I felt. I kind of like and then after a point, I just kind of kept it to myself. I had a god brother of mine sit down with me one day and have a deep conversation, and he was like, you know what, maybe you shouldn't reveal your mind to everyone. And I
Right.
and I kind of took it as, as good advice, and put it into practice, and just kind of I share the jewels with in my real life with who I feel should get it. But you'll find me in the chat box now and then dropping all kinds of pearls for the swine to trample on. But it's a hobby of mine. I try to get the information, the enlightenment out there, just because there's more to this reality than meets the eye. And I notice that a lot of the people are just in like a zombie state. They're in the motions, they're in the program, but they don't want to step outside the program. They don't want to take that symbolic um uh boat ride to the edge of whatever this is, like the Truman guy did, to see what the hell this is really all about. And it's like you say, it's scary. Sometimes people don't want to pull the blinders off. They want to stay in their slumber. They're comfortable where they are in their ignorance. I was shook into the core when I was starting to dig into this stuff. I was 19 at the time. It shook me to the core, but
Right.
I see how other people.
So here's the thing. So the way it shook you to the core, that's the same reason why people avoid these topics. And when you were probably giving them some really good information, that they rejected it because it's so challenging. Let's look at when 2020 hit with the pandemic. I was within the first week, I was telling everybody in my life, like, this is crazy. We don't have to follow these regulations. This is going to lead us all down a bad road. And everybody rejected what I was saying. And now here we are, basically 4 years later, and I internally feel vindicated. I know I was right, and history will show, true history, that I was on the right side of that particular topic. But nobody in my life at that time, especially, was responding to me because of how fearful they are. And I think that's really comes down to is the fear factor of it all. And, but what I say to people is this: it's only fearful in your mindset, because when you uncover a particular understanding, or you're aware of something that was maybe being hidden from you, or you come to some new level of consciousness, it's only you that's changed. The world has been objectively the same. You're now understanding something that's scary, but the scary thing was always there. So it's your internal struggle that needs to be focused on,
It's a
and
huge
realize. Yeah,
paradigm.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's a huge paradigm shift that you have to suddenly accept, like, well, wait a minute, it wasn't the way I thought it was all along, and it shakes you to the core. It's something that a lot of people do not want to face. It's kind of like cliff diving. Some people like it, some people don't. And to take the first jump, you have to build up the courage to face it. And, I've been a person that since 19, I've been looking into the whole I'm 38 now. But sometime around coming out of high school, I realized, wait a minute, there's something up with these contrails. There's other people talking about it. There's something going on in Hollywood. There's a lot of abuse going on in the industry. And look, it's all starting to come to the surface 20 years later. And I knew, and I kind of had an inkling that it would. And when I became aware of it, I was a person that I kind of like, because it shook me to the core, I had to deeply say, if I'm going to pray for anything, I want this to come to full blown to the surface. And I'm not surprised with a lot of the shit that's been happening throughout these years with, the 2020 and what's going on in Hollywood, and much, 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 much more to come. It's not, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's much, much more to be revealed here.
Right. It seems like there's going to be much more. All right, Emmanuel, much love. Good stuff as always. Come talk to me again. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm appreciate for having me on, and I like these kind of conversations. It kind of inspires me to come up. So I appreciate you giving me the time and space. So thanks for that.
Back at you, man. Much love. It's Emmanuel, everybody. All right, guys and dolls. It's time for that part of the show where, well, it's called news, but it's basically the the indoctrinated narratives that are being presented to what they view as the great unwashed and the profane masses. So with that, everybody, it's time for news. In tonight's top story, 3 law officers serving warrant are killed, 5 wounded in shootout at North Carolina home. 3 officers on a U.S. Marshal Task Force serving a warrant for a felon wanted for possessing a firearm were killed, and 5 other officers were wounded in a shootout Monday at a North Carolina home. Wow. Some of the officers who rushed to the Charlotte neighborhood to rescue the first wave of downed officers were wounded as a second shooter began firing on them after they killed the wanted man. So then somebody else came and shot. And et cetera, et cetera. They talk about their lost heroes and standoffs. And some people think that all these stories are hoaxes, and that they're made up to generate like discord amongst the American people. I don't think they need to hoax small things like this. Now, do they hoax large events? Some evidence shows that, yeah, they seem to. 9/11 seems to be the most egregious of those. But when I see stories like this, 3 officers killed, 5 wounded in a shootout, I don't think that necessarily has to be hoaxed. It's just, how does this media portray such an event? Because people die all the time. I live in New Jersey, and there's a city here called Camden. I live near Philadelphia, and there's a very high murder rate in Philly. People die all the time from gun violence, robberies, things like this. Okay, now we have cops being shot. A lot of this is what is being highlighted by this propaganda system to create the division, because half the people are going to side with the cops and the other half are going to side with, let's say, the person who was having this warrant being executed upon them. And I could look at both sides of this. The warrant was for a felon wanted for possessing a firearm. So where's the crime there? I don't know the complete details of the story. I probably won't look that deep into it. But again, we have this situation where we have people who have an idea of their rights and freedoms, and then we have a governmental structure who has their policies, codes, and procedures. What I'm finding more and more is, if you are a person who wants to exercise your rights and freedoms, you need to do that in a particular way, a way in which you are not simultaneously benefiting from the privileges that are afforded to you by the citizenship. What I'm trying to say is, if you want to exercise your rights and freedoms to, say, possess firearms, well, then you should act like the free and independent, or the free and spiritually sovereign man or woman that you are. Stop participating in their society as a citizen. Once you can begin to separate your status, even if it's consciously or energetically, you then can begin to walk in the God-given sovereignty that you have been afforded as a child of God. That's the thing I find with many people. They want it both ways. They want to be, let's say, U.S. nationals, or they want to have the idea of maintaining their liberties. But at the same time, they're all too willing to enjoy the privileges and benefits of the government. Like, they'll be, let's say, on some welfare entitlement system, or they'll be accepting, let's say, some type of financial entitlement from the government, unemployment, things like this. You can't have it both ways. If you want to be a sovereign agent of God, as opposed to an agent of this corrupt government, you need to embody that. But either way, these things are perfect divide and conquer tactics. Half the people back the blue, half the people back the victim, and everybody continues to fight amongst each other. Meanwhile, they maintain their control over us. They don't really care about these cops' lives. Yeah, these cops might be Masons, but typically they don't go beyond the Blue Lodge. They're very low level. So to think that the powers that shouldn't be care any more or less about the cop's life versus the victims, you'd probably be off there. In science news, NASA releases unprecedented Horsehead Nebula image captured by James Webb Space Telescope. What to know about the stellar nursery. The world's most powerful space telescope, NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, has just released the sharpest infrared images to date of the Horsehead Nebula, a small dark nebula in the constellation Orion that acts as a nursery for newborn stars. Captured in unprecedented detail, the image of the nebula focuses on a portion of the horse's mane that is about 0.8 light years in width and roughly 1,300 light years away from Earth. All right, so where do I begin with this one? So again, here we are being presented with stories of deep space that can only be validated by your trusty government because they're coming from a James Webb telescope. Well, they tell us this telescope exists about 1 million miles from Earth, and it's hanging out there in space, which you may be interested to know is 4 times more distant than the moon is. Well, based on what they tell us. So that means they have a telescope 4 times the distance of the moon that is sending back these images to give us this so-called story of the Horsehead Nebula. Again, I don't want to just try to appeal to one's incredulity regarding this, but I would ask this: how do you have a telescope existing in space that is literally physically impossible? People say, what do you mean, Z? You're saying space is impossible? No, space as presented is impossible. They can't have a telescope 1 million miles away because it is physically impossible to have a telescope 1 million miles away. Now, do they have satellites up there in the sky, whether it's in the firmament or in some kind of liquid aqueous solution, the waters above? I don't know. It's possible. More and more, I'm willing to say, okay, maybe they have things up in the sky. It could be balloons. I don't know what's up there. But what I know for sure is that the story of a James Webb telescope existing in the near perfect vacuum of space is impossible based on all applied physical reality. There's no James Webb telescope 1 million miles away because there can't be. There's no theory that you could present to make that possible. There's no number of stories that you could present me to make that possible. Something can't exist in an impossibility. So when you hear stories about objects that are many light years away and that they exist in some ever-expanding universe, you know it's not real because it can't be. Now, you might ask me, well, then what is it if it's not that? Well, it could be a lot of things. But logically, I am not obliged to tell you what something is after I tell you what it's not. Because in reality, it could be an infinite amount of things. The heavens, the luminaries above us could be so many things. For me to give you some theory would probably be arrogant on my part and show a high degree of hubris. Let's just say it's not what they're telling you, and that should be enough if you've investigated to realize that, okay, somebody's deceiving me, and what does that mean? What does it say about me? What does it say about the control structure? What does it say about the people around me? These are the questions you should be asking. What you should not do is dogmatically defend an idea that was conditioned in your mind. Because most people, when they face evidence to the contrary of their beliefs, they will employ a particular defense mechanism to protect basically their identity that has been conditioned through the propagandized belief set. All right, guys and dolls, that'll do it for the news, and that'll do it for another Z show. Much love, everybody. I'm going to try to keep the shows tighter. like, I like the way the show went tonight. It was a good opening. We brought up some topics. There was some good conversation that we had. I got to meet King Stephen. It was a good conversation. I did a little bit of the news, and then we're out. They may go a little bit longer than this, but I'm just trying to go with the vibe. I want to keep it tight, because if we're going to be here each and every night doing this, each and every weekday night, I want the show to have a nice flow to it. I don't want it to drag on. And frankly, I'd rather leave y'all wanting a little bit more than being burned out on the show. So, all right, y'all. If the fates are willing, we will be back here tomorrow. Same Z time, same Z channel. Much love all.